Well, it's a very non-traditional history for design that I started off as an engineer. I then accidentally became a psychologist and a cognitive scientist, and then an industry executive. And actually, before I switched to industry, I had already been working on the new computers that were coming out, like the Apple II and then the original Macintosh. I was consulting for Xerox, which is where a lot of the ideas came from for the original Macintosh. And, um, and so I retired from the university in 1993, thinking I'd really like to see what industry was like. And I went up to Apple, where I started a group that I called User Experience, the name that is now caught on, although in my opinion badly misused. And became a vice president of technology. And that's also where I discovered design, although it's not quite where I discovered design, because before I joined Apple, I wrote this book called The Psychology of Everyday Things, got retitled to be The Design of Everyday Things. But I really didn't know much about the profession called design, which is what I encountered at Apple. And from then on, I've decided to call myself a designer. So I'm not a traditional designer because what I cared about was about the usability of design. And for years, I talked only about making things more understandable and usable. And people complained that, yeah, but my stuff would be ugly. And so but I knew that aesthetics was important and emotion was important, but I didn't know how to write about it because the field of emotion was very, very new and not much had come out yet. But um, after my experience at Apple and uh, starting the Nielsen Norman Group, um, I followed a client to Chicago in a company that didn't work. So I ended up teaching at Northwestern University, where I found two good friends who were working in emotion. And so that's where I developed the book, the article, and then eventually the book on emotional design. First of all, you have to go and watch what people are doing. And I don't believe in asking them because people don't often know why they're doing what they're doing, and they don't understand. And in fact, the more expert they are, the less they understand about why they're doing what they're doing. Because by the time you're expert, they think it's intuitive, it's natural. You're doing it so long, you just automatically do what you do. It's interesting if you look at sports people, look at tennis players. The world's best tennis players are bad coaches because they don't know why they're good. And, notice that all the best tennis players in the world have coaches. Now, the coaches are clearly not as good a player as the person they're coaching, but they understand the principles and they can say, I see that you're not holding the racket in the right, et cetera." And, so but I play that role. In fact, I was asked at a conference recently, "Well, what have I ever designed?" And I say, I have designed things, but not things that are of great, wonderful significance. Uh, I said, "What I really design is designers, because
Yeah.
I'm an educator." You will get to later, but, I've also decided that this book, which is well known, The Design of Everyday Things, which teaches what I call human-centered design, is wrong. What's wrong about it? Well, nothing. Everything in the book I still teach and I still believe in. What's wrong is what's not in the book. And what's not in the book is a way that we destroy the environment and getting the materials and doing the manufacturing and in designing products deliberately that have to be replaced every 2 years, that are very difficult to repair. And even if they're just digital products or services, we are destroying cultures. We're addicting people in ways that are really not good for them and for society. And so it is time that we paid more attention to that. And so I decided to call that it's human-centered design plus more, HCD plus, and I've named that humanity-centered design. People complain about humanity-centered. Well, what about people-centered? What about planet-centered? What about life-centered? And I say, look, there's only one word I could choose if you want to have a centered design. So I think all these different groups that have named their work, we're all doing the same thing. One of my goals is to get humanity-centered design across the world. And for that, I've started a charity and a contest and so on, but I'll let you get to that. It is true that design influences human behavior. In fact, the goal of design is to change human behavior. But we're trying to devise things that people will use, and they'll do things differently than they ever did before. And so that's changing human behavior. So we use anthropological techniques to go out and watch people and see what they're doing and understand why and how, etc. But anthropology has a very strict rule, which is they do not wish to change societies and cultures, which is, I think, very important. However, design is in some sense just the opposite because it's our goal to help people do jobs easier, to make their lives better, to create a better life, actually. Quality of
Yeah.
life is one of the goals of a good designer. So, but mainly we have to understand people and understand what they're trying to accomplish, um, we shouldn't ask them what they need because basically they don't know. So mainly what people will tell you is the complaints about the current way they're doing things. Or in many ways, they won't even complain because they assume the current way is the only way. It's that way we've always done it. And what we can do is we can watch and see and say, oh, maybe that you don't have to do it that way. Maybe there's a whole different way. In fact, I have a rule when I was in consulting is do not solve the problem I'm asked to solve. Why? Well, because almost always it was the symptoms and not the real issue. And so if you go back and you figure out what the real cause of these symptoms are, the symptoms disappear.
Yeah.
But it also means changing, making larger changes than people had thought were necessary. I think there are huge positive benefits. Um, for example, um, I don't do searches anymore. Because the way the whole notion of searching, of course, was a technology that got developed 20 some odd, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and we all learned how to you have to figure out the keyword because we're trying to find a website that has the answer to our problem, and we got to be good at that. But today, that's not what we do anymore. I don't want to find the website that has my answer. I want to find the answer. I ask, and lo and behold, I give getting a big essay, and usually and people say, "But it makes the things up." Actually, I've been very maybe it's the kind of questions I ask, but I find that it seldom makes anything up. Because in some sense, AI, the way it works, it's generative AI, it's making everything up. It's simply pattern matching. It takes what you've given it. Notice that the answer it gives is always the beginning of the answer is always a restatement of what you asked. Because what it does is it takes that restatement and it says, "What's the next likely word?" And so it looks to find the most likely word. It has no understanding of what you're saying. It just says, "Oh, given these words, what's the most likely follow-up?" And after that, "Okay, what's the next most likely? And what's the next?" So it's making everything up. But if you give it the right kind of prompts, uh, it gets started in a direction that makes what it's putting together very valuable and useful. As an example, I switched. I took OpenAI's ChatGPT, and they now have a extension you can add to your browser. So when you search, it automatically gives you the OpenAI answer. And when I first tried it, I thought, "Wow, that's wonderful." In fact, I tried it first on my name, because usually but to my great surprise, it gave this basically a biography that was that was accurate, but it was more than I wanted. Then I turned off the extension because sometimes I just want an answer, the particular answer, and this one would give me paragraph of a very informative and useful text, but no, 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 I just wanna know what number is here, and so it's going to change the way work gets done, um, and people will lose jobs, and so people a lot of designers I get emails from people saying, "Oh, I'm really scared, now a student of design, and I don't think I'll get jobs because the AI is gonna replace me. What can I do?" And I say, become an expert. Become an expert in the use of AI because you will find it doesn't replace you, that it will actually make you more creative and maybe and more productive. And a lot of the dull, boring stuff we have to do, let it do it. And it will do all sorts of wonderful things for us, and you'll be more valued if you are an expert at that using these tools, and you'll discover though that suddenly design can be used in much more powerful ways than it has been done in the past. I just discovered an article that was published in the Nielsen Norman Group, uh, but it was also a Medium article first by a person from Argentina, which was a really excellent article, in which was saying redefine your design skills to prepare for AI, and it was written by Pablo Fernandez Vallejo. I felt it was really excellent, and what he said was, "We become much better because there are things that we do today that we can automate and not have to do, and there are things that we can work with AI to do better, and then we can things that AI can really augment and make it possible for us to do things we couldn't do before." And so, we have to do the strategic thinking and let add AI do the routine stuff. And we have to balance our trust in AI with scrutiny. We have to design for users, and there's going to be AI agents that will be able to do actual many tasks. So what we have to do is learn how to design things so the agent can find and manipulate all the activities it has to do to answer your question. If you want to say, um, I'm now in San Diego, and I have a meeting in Palo Alto, California, uh, tomorrow at 3 p.m. How do I get there? And it would have to therefore look up a wide variety of things and so on. It would have to look up how long it takes to travel. When I get to the airport in San Francisco, how long does it take to get to Palo Alto? Do I have to rent a car? What can I do? Um, and it could and then actually book the tickets for us and do everything. How do you design a system that lets the agent put all that together? And that's a very important design. Requires a human designer eventually, at least to start, right? And so we have to design for them, and we have to embrace the fact that it's going to augment the team. And but we have to also, his principle is address unequal effects to prioritize well-being. And so it's gonna require us to actually be better designers. All the wonderful craft skills that we've learned may no longer be necessary, but our ability to judge the skills and judge the result is even more important because we can say, "That isn't gonna work," or "That isn't right," or etcetera. And then we have to learn how to describe. It's as if you have this really great assistant who doesn't always do what you really need, and so you have but how do you describe in words? Well, maybe we will draw a picture and say, "It should look more like this." If you take a look at today's systems, they're getting more and more difficult to use. You have to know the commands, you have to know what they do, and a lot of the designs are horrible because, unfortunately, Apple has gone the route and other companies have followed of putting aesthetics before usability. So with your new iPhone, there's no clue about what you can do. Or take your iPad. How do you make the screen brighter? Oh, well, it turns out you have to put your hand to the upper right-hand corner and pull it down, just a short distance and then pause, and then you might get the control. That's crazy. There's no way you have to memorize all this stuff. So we're gonna talk a lot and say a lot or move a lot, or it's just going to see us, it's going to, watch what we're doing. To take a look at Apple's new Vision Pro, it allows you, you put on this goggles, But you think you're seeing the real world, but you aren't. Uh, it has a camera, and so you're seeing what the camera sees. But what that does is that with normal VR and normal types of these things, if you try to do something in the world, it's very hard. Even if you want to just put a word on the screen saying what you're looking at, it's very hard to make sure it matches the location. Because what you're seeing is really a video, it's easy. So actually, I'm now involved in a little project in healthcare. People are doing operations using these tools. The one unique thing that Apple has about other systems is they have an extremely detailed display. The display is well, that's why it's so expensive. The display is very expensive. But what I'm getting at is this is going to change a lot of things. And I think designers ought to be in the lead in helping make that change. Instead of being afraid of it, say, wow, what new opportunities. But in order to take advantage of them, we have to learn about these new opportunities and learn what the new technologies are and learn what kind of behaviors, what people are trying to accomplish and how they can use this to help them even better. I'm going to change that question a little bit. Most technical fields have ethical statements. I'm a since I also am an engineer. Uh, the engineering societies all have strict ethical statements, and I also work a lot in healthcare, and healthcare has strict ethical statements. Design doesn't have this. There are no ethical rules. There's no society that has a set of ethical statements in design that I'm aware of, and certainly not one. Not most designers are not trained in problems of ethics, and we have to change that, and, I'm actually just starting an enterprise trying to establish, um, a set of ethical guidelines for designers. I was asked because one of the award winners was a school in India called the Design Village, and, they wrote to me and they said that they were thinking of starting a team to develop ethical standards, and they showed me the early results, and could I help them? And, I said, "Well, let me ask one of my advisors," because we have 18 international advisors, and so I asked the person I thought most qualified to do this, and I asked if he would help, and he said not only did he say yes, but he said, "This is really important, and what I would like to do is bring other people who've already been thinking about ethical issues together." And so, I'm that's and I think that's going to be essential, and, AI is simply one of the issues of ethics in AI is really complex, and ethics themselves are complex because, I once tried to organize a group to do ethical standards when I was doing something for, design education, and the ethical group gave up and said, "Well, it's pretty obvious what's ethical and what's not ethical." That's not true at all because what's obvious to me, what is ethical, may for you may be unethical. Different groups, different people, different societies, different needs have very different views about what's right and wrong, and we have to accommodate those different views, and, it's a very difficult task, and unfortunately, AI has implications far beyond the normal everyday, use in society. People think about the problems that we use AI in medicine or AI driving automobiles, and who's responsible when it makes an error and so on. And what's going to happen is as soon as it makes an error, and this will happen, or somebody dies, and this will happen, or there's an automobile accident, that people will say, "See, we're using." Even if it turns out, if you take automobile driving, there's 1,000,000 people a year who die from automobile accidents in the world. Suppose we cut it by 90%, so it's only 100,000 die every year. But nonetheless, every time there's an accident where someone dies with AI, people will blame AI. Ethical requirements are very, very severe. We can establish the countries of the world could all get together and say, we will not use AI to automatically kill. What happens if there's a rogue nation or more and more of these wars are not by countries, they're by guerrilla, you know, small groups. Suppose they do something. They have machines that will just automatically find a target and boom. Well, if we are fighting them, we have no choice but to respond because they can do things in milliseconds, whereas humans can take minutes. So I don't know how to solve this problem. So, but I think it's a critically important problem, and but I am pleased that there are lots of really good people across the world who are trying to look at this and trying to make statements. So I think the AI ethical issues are being addressed by good people, but I feel that the larger that for designers, we have larger issues. Yeah, this is one of our issues, yes, but there are other issues too. The way that we have allowed designers to become the tool of industry for the profits as opposed to for the quality of life. You know, Victor Papanek complained about that in 1971 in his book, The Design for the Real World, and his complaints are still almost completely valid. I just disagree with one of the things, and he blamed designers for this, and I say it's not designers' fault because designers don't have any power or authority in a company. And so one of the things I'm trying to change is to get designers to be chief design officers of major companies, or for that matter, why not chief executive officer of major companies? And most designers, oh, they hate business, they hate administration, they hate, and then they wonder why nobody listens to them. If you want people to listen to you, you have to be able to talk the language of business if you hear it for a company. But if you work in the government, you've got to understand political issues as well. You have to, and yet so many designers are proud of their design skills, and they complain about things going on in the world, but they don't realize that the way to change those is to become one of those people doing the changes, which means you have to understand the language and the needs of what's going on in the world. It's been very well received in the design community, and it gives people a completely different new view to view about the role of design, about the history of the world, and the impacts, and the fact that things that we think are normal and acceptable are not normal, actually. They were artificial. Almost everything is artificial. It's had a big impact. And the fact that I don't explicitly discuss AI uh, actually turns out not to be an issue because the kinds of things I talk about are highly relevant to understanding how we should use AI. And in fact, it's better not to talk about specific things because specific things get out of date. Yeah, but some of my friends have been encouraging me to have an award, and I resisted it for many years, and I resisted calling it the Don Norman Award, but I finally was say, "Okay." But they wanted to give an award to people who do wonderful work, and I said, "No," because, by the time you've reached that level of, you know, of fame, if you will, and are doing wonderful work, getting an award doesn't change anything. And it's nice. I mean, I've gotten lots of awards, but I know and I have lots of good friends with many, many awards, and so what happens when you get a new award is, "Oh, that was very nice. Let's see, I got a trophy. Now, where can I put the trophy? I don't have any room. Uh, where can I hide certificates? I don't know. I don't know what to do with them." And, so I said, why don't we give an award to people who are just starting out? Because that's when you need it. You need the encouragement. Based on my new book, it should be based on societal. And so I'll give it to early career people. I don't care how old they are. They could be 70 years old, but if they're starting to do something for society, that's early career for this task. And they have to, but they have to demonstrate that they've actually made a difference. So they'll be young or young in the field, and they probably don't have much money, and they won't have much time either when they apply. And so I don't need strong evidence, but I need at least some evidence that what they're trying to do is done with the people, not for them, but with them, and many times by them, where you're helping them, but it's their ideas, and that you actually can demonstrate that there has been an improvement in the quality of their life. So basically, we are a young group, and we have a volunteer board, and we have, but more important, ask 18 people from around the world to help us, advise us, and also be judges. And so we went through the first year, that the 2024, and we were able in the end to select a number of people to give awards to. We gave two kinds of awards. One is for the early career people, and the second was for educational institutions that had the evidence they had to provide was that people that they trained were actually doing these works. And I didn't care if they were an official accredited institution. They just had to be doing training. It could be a boot camp. And then we held what we call the summit in November, and that was very successful. And I also discovered all sorts of other groups doing similar things, and so I brought them in. Commit Global was a company in Eastern Europe. The Aga Khan Foundation, which works mostly in Africa and Asia. Um, uh, Grupo Pentitos. And we brought all these groups together, and what I wanted the people, the established group to do was explain the difficulties they've been having and the failures they've had to help educate others, but also a chance for the people who won the awards, etcetera. And it was a wonderful, 2-day meeting. And we also wanna make sure we're international, and being at San Diego, we held the first one in San Diego, isn't is a bad location because it's a wonderful city, and we had a wonderful meeting, but, it's too difficult to get visas to come to the United States. We're now asking other countries, other places, if they would run the summit, and so the next one will be in Singapore, with the Singapore Polytechnics. And it's interesting, the polytechnics of the world are the ones that actually do applied work and go out and do things, whereas the universities of the world are teaching academics. And so I find it that the kind of work we're doing is more understood and more accepted by the polytechnics of the world. I was talking to somebody in Copenhagen who runs a school that is doing exactly the same kind of work. And I've known that group for a long time. It's called CID. It there was a design school started in Ivrea many, many, many years ago, Ivrea, India, Italy. It closed, however, for lack of funding, and, but the people have still managed to get together, and so there's a new school called CID, um, and so I was talking to them about joining up with me, to try to make this more, trying to say, "Why don't we take all the schools in the world that are doing societal design and try to get a society and a meeting for them, and they can use the summit as their meeting, but there ought to be a place where these schools can trade ideas, for themselves. There's no place where practitioners can get together and share ideas. Right now, practitioners mainly brag about, "I did this, I did this, I did this." But I want them to say, "I did this, and didn't work, and here's what we've learned, and here's what you might want to get from this." And so that's where I'm trying to move in the future.